Good morning. Good morning.
Have you been before?
Yes, I have.
Right,
Yeah.
so you know about the track and
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
There's actually quite a few Redshank around today.
Okay.
So the Lapwing have been in a while, but
yeah.
certainly more Redshank today than I saw on Wednesday. So,
okay. Are the short-eared owls showing? Or? Not so much.
I don't really see anybody in the morning to ask, but
Right.
It's usually mid-afternoon, sort of 3 or 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
And they've probably only got another couple of weeks left before they disappear. So
Okay.
you'll see the crowds.
Yes, I expect so. Okay.
Have a good day.
Thank you. All right. Hi. Today we're at Elmley on the Isle of Sheppey in Kent, and this is one of my favourite places to photograph wildlife in the UK. It's a private nature reserve. You have to pay £6 to come in, and the entrance and the gate where you pay is right at the beginning of a dirt track that goes across to a car park, but across a marsh. So it's almost 2 miles of a dirt track across a marsh, and over the years I've photographed curlews, snipe, lapwing, redshank here. You can do short-eared owls and even marsh harrier. It's a really good place for bird photography. You used to be able to get in earlier. Now you're restricted to 9 o'clock, and they're not open every day of the week, so you need to check the website. But a very worthwhile place coming to for bird photography. So what you've got on the left and the right hand side of the track is these little flash pools and water channels, and the waders can be absolutely anywhere, and you just drive along slowly using the car as a hide. You're not allowed to get out of the vehicle, you have to stay in.
We'll start off with a grey heron, a very variable species. In places they can be so tame you can walk up to them in the London parks and some Birmingham parks, and he has caught a fish there. You can just about make it out. I'll slow it down, we'll do that again. And just about see the fish at the top end. He's just got to separate it from that bit of grass or weed. Out in the wilds, these can be a very nervous bird. You don't get within 100 metres of them before they fly away. But here, from the car, you're close enough. I like this shot because it's almost like low angle. It's just the lay of the land. Now this is a bit confusing, but if you watch that very carefully, he actually caught 2 fish. He didn't splice one fish in half, which is what I thought at first had happened. There was 2 fish there and he missed both of them. And the little egret, quite a common species across the UK now. A very different fishing technique. They use the legs to stir up the mud and flush out small fish and insects. When I was a teenager, I set myself the task of photographing all the regular British birds. This is the resident species, the summer visitors and the winter visitors. There's usually about 240 species on a list like that. In those days, little egret wasn't on the list, but it is now, along with cattle egret and great egret too. But I have photographed them all, even though I've had to add them to the list. So all the footage and the stills pictures are taken with the Sony A1 and the 200-600 zoom, just a couple of stills pictures. These are taken at almost 600mm and 2,500th of a second with the lens wide open. Oyster catchers being very noisy. It is the spring, so the season when you can expect a lot of interaction between the birds. The weather wasn't perfect all day long. We had a bit of drizzle, as you can see on the back of this bird. And there were a lot of redshank around as well. Known as the sentinel of the marshes because it's a very noisy bird that takes to the air to start to give its alarm call when there's a predator around. And in slow motion here. This is 120 frames per second. The autofocus is not quite as good in video mode as it is in stills mode with the Sony A1, but I'm getting better at it. But you have to be very careful with the focusing points. And a couple of stills pictures that I took on a previous day. I always find it difficult to take both stills and video on the same day. And a shoveler. I should say northern shoveler. They're always changing the names of birds. And this is the male. And the female. Much more cryptically coloured because she's going to be sitting on the eggs. This pair started to look very alert and I thought they were going to take off, and then you hesitate. Should I zoom back to give myself a bit more space? But in the end they didn't. There's always other cars on the track and it's best to avoid weekends, but you can't always do that, but it's copable with. Another egret that is now becoming increasingly common in the UK, the western cattle egret. The track is wide enough almost everywhere that you can pull over without blocking the traffic. The snipe was taken on a different day, and not a bird I get to photograph that often here. But the northern lapwing is widespread as you go across the marsh, and it's one of the best places in the country to be photographing lapwings, especially in the spring when they're doing the displaying. And this is both the aerial display and the ground displays too. Just a few shots up in the air, all with the Sony A1. Shutter speed I'd be looking for would be 2,500ths of a second, and perhaps a little bit faster at times. Tumbling upside down as they do. And this used to be such a common sight when I was a lad. Almost every farm had lapwings breeding, and it was the sound of spring. Two males chasing each other around in the sky. Occasionally it can be a female, but usually it's two males fighting. The ISO for the flight shots was 1600, which is my default setting with the Sony A1. I'm quite happy to go faster, but I very rarely go slower than 1600. And the autofocus copes absolutely brilliantly with this. The bird on the ground was the one I'd focused on, so the bird attacking it is coming into focus as it gets closer to it. But this is such a common sight in the spring as you go across these marshes at Elmley. So here we have a male, much more black on the face and a longer crest, and it's starting to do its ground nest scraping display. It doesn't necessarily do this where they will eventually nest. It will do it in several different places, and perhaps it's the female that chooses the spot that she wants. But to see the male doing the nest scraping is a very common sight. So we're looking at it now in video mode. He pushes back with his feet. And here's a female, far less black on the face and a much shorter crest. Now here we have the female nest scraping, and what often happens at this point is the male will mate her, but usually he flies up in the air, does a short display and then comes back and lands directly on top of the female. So if I ever see a female nest scraping by herself and the male is up in the air, then I anticipate that they are about to mate. You can also see the male is picking up bits of grass and tossing them behind him, which is all part of the ground nesting display. Now I don't know what all these cars were waiting for, but most of them were photographers. It could have been a marsh harrier or barn owl, but there was certainly a lot of brown hares around in this particular location, but I think that was a bonus. It wasn't really what they were trying to photograph, but it was a good opportunity.
It's raining a bit, so I thought that might put the short-eared owls off, but it's only light rain, but they are feeding. You come up to the car park, I'm about 80 metres before the car park, and it's been sitting on a fence and flying around. I haven't got anything really good yet.
And they didn't really perform that well for me. Most of the photographers were in the car park photographing them, but I felt this was the better place, just 80 metres before the farm. You can see the raindrops in the picture. This is 5000 ISO and a shutter speed of 1,000th of a second with the lens wide open. Thanks for watching.